Welcome to Understanding and Adapting Life. Webinars and podcasts focusing on many ways we can live a fuller life by adapting and accommodating for issues, difficulties, and challenges we experience in our daily lives. My name is Tracy Lapriziosa, and welcome to our Think-A-Thon on accessibility for the living room. Nancy Jo Geis and I collaborated on this, and we'll give a wave, Nancy Jo. Nancy Jo provided some slides and some pictures of her living room so we can look at some of the accessibility features that she has. And if anybody else wants to share some, we can share some, and then we can get down to some problem solving. If anybody has some trouble areas they want to problem solve, we can get down to that. So before I share Nancy's slides, I just wanted to talk like maybe just 2 or 3 minutes about things when you're thinking about the living room, what's important to consider for access. And the number one thing that typically comes up is flooring. That's because, if you fall, you want to have something underneath you that's soft. So floors that are like tile, like a hard tile or painted concrete, might not be quite so safe. And carpeted floors are good for some people, but not good for others. Carpet floors are great, of course, if you fall, you have a little bit of padding there, but it might not be good for someone in a wheelchair because it would make it rolling across it a little bit more difficult. But if you have to have carpet for a wheelchair, it's best that the carpet is a really, really tight loop and a really, really low pile so you don't have all that squishiness to deal with. So that was the number one thing. As I did a little research, that was the number one thing that came up as questions for accessibility for the living room. And the second thing that came up was furniture. How often have you gone to visit someone and you sit on their couch and then it's time to get up and you're thinking, how am I going to get up? Because I don't have 2 arms to push myself up, or it doesn't look real pretty as you're getting up. So furniture came up as the second thing. So when you're looking at accessibility, you want to look for furniture that's easy to stand up from. And I'm not in my living room today, but in each of my rooms, I try to have at least one chair that's a little bit firmer and a little bit higher with 2 armrests, because a lot of elderly people come to visit, mother-in-law, my mom, my dad back in the day. And so that was where they would sit in order to be able to get up, because you need something supportive to push yourself up. And when you're looking at a seat, you also want to look at like seat depth. You don't want it to be too deep, because how often have you sat down on that couch and your knees are bent at the end, but your backside doesn't get all the way up to the back of the couch, and you're either lying in their couch or you're sitting up like this the whole time and you're getting kind of fatigued. So you want to look at that seat depth a little bit. Unless you have like a really tall person, they might need that seat depth, right? And you want to make sure it's wide enough, everybody's comfortable, and like I said, have those armrests. And a lot of people have recliners. So you got to look at too the types of recliners. Of course, there's the automatic recliners, which I think somebody's going to show us in a little bit. But other recliners you got to watch. There's ones that have the levers, some that have a push button. And like I have some recliners that you have to put your hands on the arms of the chair and then push back with your body weight. Not a fan. They're not real easy to use. You got to get yourself in just the right position to push yourself back. So I would not recommend them. Another furniture aspect is when you're looking at shelving. Having shelves that are open that you could put your pretty things on, but also have your functional things that you need to have easy access, so you don't have to be fiddling around with doors and knobs and that kind of thing. And last but not least about the living room is the coffee table. Now, coffee tables can be very dangerous because a lot of them have like sharp corners. So if you really feel like you need a coffee table, a rounded one is best. But, for accessibility, it's best not to have a coffee table at all. And I know we just are in the process of moving my mother-in-law and my aunt-in-law into independent living, and both of them had a really, really hard time giving up the coffee table. I've always had a coffee table, and they had a really hard time. But now that one of them's in the apartment, she's like, oh, if my coffee table were here, I wouldn't be able to move around with my walker very well. So it really does open things up, and there are other options like little side tables that can help you out with that. So first was flooring, second was furniture, and the other one has to do with like the sensory piece of like auditory and visual, making sure that you have contrast in color if you need it, making sure that the lighting isn't creating any type of glare on your TV screen or your computer screen. And then maybe having like a doorbell system that rings really loud so you can hear it, because a lot of times the living room may not be near the door. People are knocking, you may not hear it. So that was the third area. And the fourth area was just like practical considerations just to make life easier. And some of these we've talked about a little bit in the previous two accessibility ones, but light switches, making sure they're accessible, having them be low enough that you can reach them if you're in a wheelchair, and lamps that are plugged into the wall so you can operate them with a flip switch on the wall rather than having to turn that little tiny knob. Or better yet, if you have a touch lamp, something that's really easy to activate. You can also consider raising up your outlets a little bit too. An electrician can easily raise them up for you. And the most important thing for the living room and probably every room in the house is decluttering. Getting rid of all the excess clutter that could be falling in your path, getting in your way as you're trying to get from point A to point B, or you're reaching for something so you don't knock something else over. Just making sure all those pathways for walking or reaching are wide open. So those are the four areas that came up when I did a little bit of research on what's important about accessibility for the living room. Now, Nancy Jo graciously took some pictures and provided some statements about her living room. So I'm going to share Nancy Jo's living room. Peek inside Nancy Jo's living room. Nancy Jo said, my pedal bike is light for me to move around and I can use it from my couch while I watch TV. I love the pedal bikes. They are a nice way to just kind of get a little bit of movement. And if you don't feel like getting up and walking around, taking those breaks, you can actually do it without having to get up. And it keeps the blood circulating, moving around. All electronics have a remote. And she says, my movies and Wii games, I can easily reach from my chair. My TV is big enough for me to see. And she does have that large screen TV and the cabinet with everything in it there. And it looks like there's a lot of nice space in front of the TV. Push button control of the temperature in the living room, plus a push button remote. You can see the remote lying on top of the unit, but there are push buttons in the front. So it's easy access to operate her temperature control, heat and air conditioning. There's open space for someone using a wheelchair or walker to access. And as you notice, Nancy Jo does not have a coffee table, which gives so much more space to be able to move in and out there. And she has the open shelving, that easy to get things in and out without having to be opening cabinet doors or whatever. And if you look at the chair on the right side of the screen, I see a chair there that looks like it's a little bit taller, has the armrest. So if somebody comes who has a little bit of difficulty getting up and down, there's that chair to be able to sit in. And Nancy says, I get lots of natural light during the day. I have lamps at each seat. They operate by a switch on the wall or a twist on the lamp. And she can choose lots of light or only a little with the dimmer control. And lighting is really important because there's sometimes where we need a lot of light and sometimes where we don't want light. And if it's on a wall switch, it's a lot easier to go back and forth. And she had those nice big bright windows there. So there were a number of things that I saw in your apartment, Nancy Jo, that we had just mentioned. Open space, no coffee table. The carpet looked like it was a low pile. You had open shelves, the chair that you can get up and down out of, the light switch operated lamps. Any questions or anything for Nancy Jo and her accessibility of her apartment, her living room?
Nancy, this is Rosa. How long have you been in your home? It's still pretty new, right? Because this is, I believe, your first apartment on your own.
Almost 1 year.
Wow. Coming up soon, an anniversary. You still love it? Yeah, that's awesome. I love the colors and the light. It's really neat. So happy for you. Yeah, yeah.
Did you help plan the layout of your living room?
Yes.
I bet.
Great.
That's really nice.
Yeah, I think to pick it out, because I know where I like to sit in relation to my TV or where to have my things. That's awesome.
Very cool. Thanks for showing up and dying to see your place.
Nice little tour.
Cool.
Anyone else have some things that they want to share regarding accessibility?
This is from a presentation I made a number of years ago called Mom and Her AT. This is a segment of that. So just a little bit of the backstory. So my mom was in her late 80s. She had a number of different things going on with her physically, mentally. She was very alert and strong and all that kind of stuff, but her body, as she said, was failing her. And so she lived in an assisted living location with my Aunt Jean after they left their beautiful penthouse apartment in Philadelphia. And then my Aunt Jean became very ill and passed away, and my mom was alone. And she eventually had some more physical issues. She moved into a nursing home, much against my whatever, and was very, very sad and depressed there. And I finally was able to convince my mom and my family, frankly, that she could live in an apartment with some adaptations that we would make and a neighbor that would help and some built-in help. So this is just part of this presentation talking all about the accessibility stuff that we did in my mom's home, my mom's beautiful apartment, which cost under $500 in total, all the changes that we did. And this is the part about her living room. So let me play it for you, and here we go. My mom loved company. We'd come over, and there were certain things like a lot of seniors. She did a certain number of things, including watching a lot of TV. And I started noticing that she only seemed to watch Channel 6, ABC. And in the past, she loved PBS, Channel 12 in Philadelphia, and their various shows. She loved a number of different shows. And when I'd ask her about them, I realized that she was no longer watching them. Or if I called her and said, "Oh, Mom, you have to check out channel such and such, it's on," or the Grammys are on, or if it wasn't on Channel 6, she'd say, "Oh, I missed it, I didn't get to see it." And she'd make up some excuse. So one day I was sitting at her place and we were watching TV and sipping on some Chablis. And I said to her, "Mom, do you only watch Channel 6? And she said yes. And I asked her why, and the floodgates opened. She admitted that she no longer could operate the remote, and that years before, with her and Aunt Jean, in their beautiful Center City, Philadelphia apartment, they had told me that a new TV that they never used remotes. They were non-remote people. But the new TV that they had, they couldn't find the on-off button. And so I took one of Aunt Jean's bright red nail polishes and I put a little dot of red nail polish on the on-off button on that TV. Well, here we are years later. Aunt Jean has unfortunately gotten much worse and needed to move on, and she passed away not long after that. And my mom was living by herself, and now she has her ladder back chair to help her get out of bed, and she has her red pitcher and her say when to pour her wine. And now I'm finding out that the red dot on the TV of nail polish is still there, and that's how my mom operates the television. She goes over to it and she pushes the button, and it's on Channel 6 at a certain volume, and that's where it stays. So we started playing with the remotes. I looked to see what different remotes were available for TVs, and some of them were just too big for her small hands, and some of them were this and that and the other thing. So what I finally did is just got creative. She had a couple, just like many of us, she had a couple of remotes. So we used one, I adapted one of them. It says remote to change channels. So what I did is I took a paper envelope and I covered all of the buttons on the remote and then carved out just the channel up and channel down and highlighted it with bright orange puffy paint and tested it with my mom, and my mom could see it and she could do it. And the biggest challenge was for my brother and anybody else coming to visit my mom that they didn't mess up the remotes. So I labeled it for everybody else, not for my mom. She knew that this was the change channel remote. But anyway, did this, and all of a sudden my mother was able to start changing channels, and she started watching PBS again. And then we took this other one, and this one was just to turn it on and off. And see, the power button is bright red, the on-off button. So she could see that and she could feel it because it had a little bump on it as well. So we didn't need to cover it all up because she could handle this. So this was her turning the TV on and off. And the previous one was to change the channel. And otherwise, the rule was for everybody, don't mess with the volume. It was set at the volume that she liked. And my mother was able to use this for a long time, these two just adapted remotes, and they were by her side. We played with different phones, and I finally found this phone with enlarged buttons. It's a corded phone. Yes, this is a little bit back in time. My mother did not want a phone that was cordless. This sat beside her table. Her phone number was written in dark black permanent marker on the side of the phone. The 215-742-2531 number was there, and she could see that because it was the black against the light gray of the phone. Otherwise, the phone had big numbers, which she could hit, but she couldn't remember people's phone numbers. So above the numeral pads are 4 buttons. The first one, you can't really see what it said, but it said MEM, M-E-M. So it was your memory 1, memory 2, memory whatever. And I put a raised red dot on it so that she could feel it and see it. And within that, memory 1 was Janie's phone number because Janie was the firstborn. Memory 2, she would hit the red button, and then 2, that was Ricky because he was secondborn. Then there was memory 3, which was Beth. Then there was memory 4, until me, of course, I was the last one. But this way she could start calling us. All she had to hit was the mem button with she had just to find the big dot, push that, and then either 1, 2, 3, etc., and all that. Then the other ones up top were calling for her aid or an emergency 911. And she was able to start using her phone and not just waiting for us to call, but calling us. This is a clock. Look at the name, See More. This sat beside my mom's favorite chair, her favorite table with her favorite lamp, her remotes, everything. And with this, the biggest challenge was to make sure the batteries were always good in it. And nobody was allowed to touch it. It was angled in a way. And again, it was very large. It was probably about an 11 by 12 or something like that. And this way she could see what time it was at any time. And again, it's the offset of numerals against the black background. We got this from Maxi Aids. I think it was under $10, believe it or not. A couple of other things my mom had right beside her. She had a couple of different magnifying glasses that she used for different things. My mom had macular degeneration, amongst other things. So her vision was really failing. She was actually legally blind in one eye and almost in the other. So the one magnifying glass on the right, I forget what the magnification level was, but I know it was pretty intense. She used that. It was not too heavy. And that was the big thing because my mother was very small and frail. So she could use that for general things. And then the one on the left had a light with it, and it was 10 times magnification. It was a little heavier, but that helped her when the one on the right failed. And with that, my mom was able to read again, which was one of her passions in the past, and she had stopped doing for a long time. We had tried a lot of other magnification screens, but she didn't like them. They were just too bulky. So with these two simple ones, dollar store magnifying glasses, they worked great. Here was one of her favorite lights. It just has a push button, rocker switch. So she was this gooseneck. She didn't think it was very pretty, like the lamp beside her, but it worked really well to shine an intense light on her when she needed that. And again, that was right beside her. And here was her setup, her favorite chair with, as Tracy mentioned, it was a wingback chair with arms that she could use to push herself up from. She had a cushion behind it for her back. She had her tray table with her remotes always there, oftentimes with either a cup of tea or a glass of wine and snacks. She had her phone, she had her magnifying glasses, she had her light, she had her clock. And if you can see next to the left of the clock is a little brass tab And they were touch buttons to turn on and off her lights that we had set up all around the place. So all she had to do was feel for one of them and give it a light tap, and the light would come on or off. And then the piece de resistance was the magnification screen for her TV. My mother loved Jeopardy amongst other shows. And sitting and watching Jeopardy with her, she would ask me to read for her what was the question, what was going on, and things like that. And I started realizing that she obviously couldn't see it. I talked with her about getting a large screen TV, but my mother's idea was no, that was ugly, and it was only in sports bars. How she knew that, I don't know. But anyway, she wanted no part of it in her pretty living room. So as many things with my mom, I admit I kind of tricked her. I one day came over to visit, and I just happened to bring this magnification screen that we had gotten for our network's AT library, or so I told her. And I just happened to bring it in because I didn't want to, quote, leave it in the car. I brought it in and I said, oh, check this thing out. I got this for one of my clients, one of the people that I'm working with. I fibbed and said, it's go on the TV to help magnify it. The TV sits on those two kind of white tray legs, and then you pull it out, and the more you pull it out, it more the magnifies the screen. I said, would you mind if I test it out? I've never tried it before. And so this is kind of the ploy I used, which my mother eventually saw through, that I would do with many different things. I'd bring them over and say, oh, do you mind testing this for somebody else? I want to see how it works. Always knowing that it was something she could really use. So I put the TV on the screen. She sat in her pretty little burgundy chair, and I kept pulling it out until she could see it. And we had this silly cartoon on. And at first I tested and said, what do you see on the screen? She didn't see anything. It was all a blur. And I pulled it out and pulled it out. There's a little glare on it here from the lamp. But she was able to say, oh, it's a man in a red suit and a woman in a blue blouse. And I think that's their little girl with them. And oh my goodness. And then I changed the channel, or actually she changed the channel. And one other show came up, and she was able to read from the TV. And then she said to me, so now you're going to take this away from me, aren't you? And you're going to give it to somebody else. To which I said, oh gosh, Mom, if you want it, I guess I can leave it with you. Let me make a phone call. And pretended to make a phone call. I think I might have Jess or somebody or other, and pretended to ask, do you think it would be okay if we left this with my mom and I'll get another one? Oh, okay, all right. And so we did that. And so my mom was able to change the channels. And with the screen magnification, she was able to read the Jeopardy questions herself. And what did this cost? I think it was maybe at the time, I don't know if it was $89 or $99. This was probably the most expensive adaptation we made in my mom's house, but it worked as long as nobody else messed with it. And that was the biggest problem that we would run into, and we run into all the time. We help people make adaptations for them, and then somebody comes along and says, what's that? And then they funky fiddle with it, and then it's messed up. That again is just a little bit of my mom's living room from years ago, from the Mom and Her AT webinar that we made.
Thank you, Rosa. There's some really cool things in there.
Yeah.
Really cool. I love the TV magnification, and I love the setup around her chair. I mean, isn't that what's really important for all of us, is like having everything right next to us at our chair when we're watching TV? I mean, I have a drawer with all kinds of gizmos in it, so I don't have to get out of my seat.
Yeah. And again,
Awesome.
the main thing was telling everybody, the rest of my family, her aides that would come in to visit, and different things like, please don't touch this. This is her stuff. And because she had very limited mobility at the time and very limited vision, and on top of that, she also had very limited touch because she had had several strokes and spinal cord injuries. So she really couldn't touch and feel a lot of things. So it's like, don't mess her up, don't move things, trying to get people to realize that things were where they were supposed to be, where she wanted them. That was the hardest of all.
Awesome. Any other comments or questions for Rosa?
I'm going to switch to my phone and show you something. There you go. This chair is actually a lift chair. It was purchased for my mom, but we love it too. Doris is going to demonstrate what it does. It uses a remote. And when my mom used this, she needed to use it all the way to standing. And her walker would be in front of her. And then the chair is up. My mom was 5'1", and this chair was definitely purchased for her. And it does not work for me because I am 5'9". It's also, if you're sitting, you'll notice she just has to lean back on it and then use the button, and it'll take her to a sitting position safely. And this chair does the same, but has the added ability that this part of the back can come forward. And for me, I have some spinal issues. So that back piece moving forward makes it that my head is good.
Diane, does the recliner also recline all the way back, like so that somebody could sleep on it?
Both of them do. Both of them stand up all the way, and both of them recline all the way flat. So they're really nice that way. And they typically are expensive, but I've noticed Wayfair has some really cheap ones, like $300, which is unbelievable for these chairs. So now I think they've become really affordable for folks. They can be found at a lower price point. But when my mom needed this, it made it very easy for her to be getting up and down safely because she could not push off to get up out of a chair. Even with a cane or a walker. So that became a safety issue, having that chair.
Diane, we also support someone who has a similar chair, and that's been really useful to her. She started to lose some skills, but she had very high anxiety. So with transfers, she was not comfortable trusting staff to transfer her from one position to the other. So getting her that chair was really helpful because then when she needed to get up, she could just use the remote and do it and just get a hand instead of someone completely lifting her or trying to use the wheel if she wasn't comfortable in it. So that really did help her with her anxiety and transferring too.
And we took my mom with us to get this because, as I said, she was very, very short. She was 5'1", and she needed to be able to have her knees in the right position, and it has a very short seat depth. And that way, it's really comfortable for her once she's down, because once she's in the chair, she didn't have the strength to push herself back in the chair, and she didn't have to because it's such a shallow seat depth, which is why it does not work for me, who has long legs, because I'll be like this, being pushed out of the chair. I need the depth. But it's really good to take someone with you, let them try different ones and see which one works, because they have so many different sizes, heights, seat depths, widths, and you find the one that's right for that person. And then it's like, no, you can't sit there. That's mom's chair. Sorry, but that's the way it is.
What are some options for people who may not be able to afford a recliner or, a new chair in order to make a chair more accessible for their height?
One thing we tried, when I tried using a cushion on it to make it a little taller, but the seat depth didn't work. But even for my mom, before we tried a lift chair, they have these things you can buy. They're like on a spring, a seat spring, so they can kind of like push, and they didn't really work. She didn't feel safe using them. But for some folks, that's all they need, is that little spring action to start the lift process when they go to stand. And I know they're relatively cheap compared to buying a whole chair, but really try one out and make sure the person you're supporting feels safe with them. My mom said she felt like she was going to be launched out of the chair with this.
When I think about chairs, we talked about having floors that maybe aren't carpet, but I think sometimes some of the downsides of not being carpet for a chair is the chair can slide a little bit. So you have to put something on the bottom of the chair leg so that it won't slip and slide.
The material of the chair matters too. She didn't like the vinyl or leather chairs because she was slipping on them. They would make her slip forward out of the chair. She needed to have that cloth.
And it's funny because my mom similarly had problems with certain fabric. As she said, they would grab my slacks and she couldn't move at all. So it was like I used to tease her about a lot of things that she was like Goldilocks. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too slippery, it's too sticky, it's too this, but it matters. It matters a lot.
It underlines just how personalized assistive technology has to be. It's not a one size fits all. It's not that worked for me, it'll work for you. It's what do you need for your specific abilities? And for my mom, who didn't have a lot of upper body strength anymore, it was really important that she be able to be seated comfortably and not have to constantly push up and move and shift, because she couldn't do that. And she hated to ask us to help her do that, although we were willing to do that.
Right. And with my mom, it compounded one other factor that compounded. It had to be pretty.
Yes.
My mom didn't like anything that was industrial looking she was.
Don't make my living room look like a hospital.
Exactly. That was actually more important to her than anything else, that it looked pretty, that it looked
And it had to match her other couch. Don't bring that in here if it don't match.
That's right. I think one of the things that we found, and probably everybody knows this, but with Comcast, when you talk into it, it actually will pick up Deanna's AAC device, like the Ellen Show. So I'm sure everybody knows that, but that gives her a lot of independence. It doesn't always work 100% of the time, but I think technology has just come so far. It's awesome.
That's very cool. That's cool. So what is she using? What device is she using these days, Diane?
She has touch chat. We have it on numerous devices that aren't linked together. So that's not working. We have an iPhone 8 Plus. Deanna, want to say hi to everybody?
Oh my God. Hey, girl. Happy birthday.
Somebody said happy birthday. Yeah, happy birthday. What do you say?
Thank
you, of course.
Welcome.
She's ready to play some Wii here. If you can see, she's got the remote in her hand.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so she has some different devices, the iPhone 8 Plus, which has the larger screen. She has our big original iPad, and then she has an iPad mini. Unfortunately, we can't sync them. There's no tech team, so that would be my only gripe. There's no AT team at the school that there was before she graduated, but it's still working for her. We just can't sync everything.
Yeah.
It's a $300 app, so it's not like a dedicated device, but it's serving her.
That's good. It works. Nancy, what are you still primarily using your phone, Nancy Jo? Yeah, that's what I thought. I know you've tried out so many different devices and things.
I know one of the things, it's not strictly living room, but one of the things that also we got, it's like, it only cost like $30 on Amazon. It was a pendant my mom could wear that was a button, and it would sound an alarm wherever we were in the house. So that if she was sitting in the living room and needed, if she needed to shift her position, or if she felt like she was falling or anything, she could call us, I know they have life alert buttons, but for whatever reason, that wasn't happening. Not having those strangers. But it was okay to push a button that got our attention.
Right. My mother had a bell.
Yeah.
Kind of like wait staff, come get me.
Yeah.
Those bells that you can tap.
Yeah. My mother's was
I use iPad and iPhone.
Gotcha. I didn't know if you still used your iPad too, Nancy. That's good to know. Cool. Very cool.
And you're right, Tracy. When my mom was with us, we did not have a coffee table because that would not have worked with the scooter or
Yep.
the walker or the cane or any of that, you know. But the coffee table we have is very important right now for my brother because if he's on the floor doing something, he can't get up. But our coffee table is extremely sturdy wood. So he can push up on that table, safely get up, which he's had to learn. He was using his cane to do it and it snapped on him. So he's learning use that very sturdy furniture wherever it is.
Sometimes you can use a chair too,
Yeah.
a sturdy chair that's heavy. Anybody else have something they wanted to share? Nikita?
Yeah, I can share. You know, we've talked about how coffee tables aren't accessible and, you know, not good for if you have someone in a wheelchair that needs to get around. But I have a beloved coffee table that has storage and it has a lift top. So I don't have a picture of my coffee table because my living room's kind of a mess right now. It's not neat like Nancy Joe's. But I do have the exact coffee table that I bought from IKEA. This is the coffee table that I have. And one of the biggest things about this was mostly the storage. So I live in a pretty small apartment and I have a lot of stuff and I should probably get rid of it, but my hoarding tendencies won't let me. So I just shove everything in this storage space, much to the dismay of my fiance. But as you can see, the top lifts up, which comes in handy because every day is different. How I want to sit on the couch is different day to day. Some days I don't mind hunching over, eating my dinner while watching a Netflix show. Other days I kind of want to sit back and I want to lift the table closer to me. Some days I'm sitting on the floor and doing whatever, you know, arts and crafts or eating right at the table. So it provides those options for me, which I think is important for people and just thinking about accommodations in general. You want people to have those options and to be able to make that decision. Now, I've noticed that a lot of these kinds of coffee tables are square or rectangular with like sharp edges, but I did happen to find this round one that I think is pretty cool. You know, you still get the storage space, the lift top, and the roundness. You know, you might want that for your decor. There are options out there for people, but that's just one of the ways that I make my home more comfortable for myself, not my fiance. He doesn't get any say.
I love that.
My brother actually wants one of those.
They're handy.
He does. He says, my new apartment, I want one of those.
Yeah, I keep playing cards. Not that I invite anybody over to play these games, but I have them in my coffee table. So that is that for my living room.
I love that. I know my mother-in-law and aunt-in-law are really trying right now to try and figure out how to get enough storage in their living room. Like what kinds of things provide ample storage? And of course, that coffee table was a good example, but they can't really have a coffee table. But does anybody else have any other ideas of things that you can use for like extra storage in a living room that won't get in the way or clutter things up?
We have a side table that my mom used. It's similar, but it's just an end table, but tons of storage in it. Has the drawers and a magazine rack on the side, and the top of it swivels, so she would use it as her table to eat her dinner. If she wanted to eat her dinner there, and yet it would just swing out of the way when she didn't want it there. It's not where I could get to it, or I would. Yeah. But I know they have them on Amazon. They're an end table and it just swings around. Because when you're dealing with recliners, it's very difficult. You can't put something under them. You can't have those tables that the feet go under the couch or something like that. So this worked, having that swivel.
My mother had a small, pretty, of course, wingback chair that she had that she would push to the side, a very lightweight ottoman or footstool. It was round and it wasn't on legs. It was on the ground, but it was very light. She could even push it with her legs, but you could push the top off, and it had storage underneath where she kept a blanket so that she would access that when she was chilly. Yep.
Kathy had said universal design in all rooms. The big trick is how to convert existing spaces to universal design. Another consideration is HCBS waiver remote supports, which might include some kind of video display in a public space. I also put in the chat a website that I found. It has a checklist for making your home more accessible. And it kind of went through a number of different rooms. So it's just kind of a cool thing that you can kind of print out and use if you would like or want to double check some things in your own home or somebody else's.
I would just add that this was definitely the fact with my mom, but I think with a lot of other people, we get so excited with the idea of, oh, we can make this accessible, and we can do this and we can do that. And we suddenly start changing the feel of their home. And it's so much cheaper and so much easier if you can start fresh, like Nancy, you designing your own place right from the start. But the other thing is, if we can just make adaptations first and accommodations and not just buy all new, but like that envelope on the remote and the puffy paint, it worked wonders. I mean, I cannot tell you how many different remotes we tried that didn't work when just that simple accommodation really worked and it really helped. So I think we get all gangbusters and excited. Oh yeah, we can do this. We could do, when sometimes the very simple things are really the things that make the difference.
Yeah.
And there's so much that's readily available now. Like Jess and I remember, Jess, you were talking about when we were outfitting the office up in Northumberland County and going to the furniture store and kind of going in with our accessibility eyes on and trying to see what would work and trying out different things and going into all kinds of different stores, dollar stores and all kinds of different stores, and finding things that really were adaptations or accommodations that would work. And yet were really simple just by thinking that way, putting that hat on.
And so many times when you look for the adaptation in the stores, they're very pricey. It's very difficult. And yet you can get something that will make it work in another store. Like we got that little button at Amazon for $29, and it's like they have all these alarm systems you can buy and all this, like they're so pricey. Just this little thing that you find in a store, yeah, we can use that. We don't need anything real fancy.
I think one of the things is it's really important to help teams think creatively, because there's sometimes they will go to what is the service or whatever, but a lot of times they just need support to see things through those eyes. And a lot of times they may not be getting that. We've been lucky. I think one of the things that the series has been validating that we are doing a lot of these things already. These are great suggestions like, oh yeah, we're doing that, particularly around the kitchen accessibility, but with the flip switches and the way Deanna is able to control her environment, control the TV. I think just being stifled is one of probably the biggest barriers I think that teens face. And it's a shame. It's been a good series.
And if you use a lot of these ability website items, then sometimes the environment starts feeling clinical and feeling medical, and like Rosa said, it stops feeling like a person's home. It's not what you would see in every other place. Whereas if you can look for things that will adapt what already is there, it's so much better because it's still their home. And it doesn't look like tech is great. I think tech is wonderful. I'm a techie. That's the truth. But not everybody is, and not everybody wants their home to look like the 10 best gizmos that are available this month.
I agree. It's best to fit the person. A techie person might like all the techie things, and some of us who aren't techie may not want that. But I think it's a good point has been made about starting simple, starting with what's familiar, what's easy to get, trying that first, and then kind of working your way up the ladder from there to things that might be a little bit more adaptive. But thank you all for coming again today. And I think we had some really great conversation today. I really thought it was great to have different points of view and a couple of comments from everybody. So I really appreciate all the comments and people joining us today. And we hope that you'll come back next month when we do the bedroom accessibility series. So thanks again for joining us and have a great afternoon.